All right, hello, welcome back, everybody. PayPal and Patreon links are down below in the description and top pin comment if you want to support me. Only do so if you actually can. So, the USGS released the MCS 2024, which is the annual data release covering changes in mine production levels across the world for different metal and mineral resources. We'll be going through some of the most important ones now with the changed, updated graphs that I've made, starting with global silver production from silver mines, one of the ones of most concern, particularly because of this, our obsession with solar panels that's going to be our downfall. Solar panels, for those who don't know, require silver to the point where we've gone from back in the earliest of the 2010s, only between 20 and 40 million ounces per year being consumed to make solar panels, to now upwards of 160 plus million ounces per year of silver being used to make solar panels. It is just going to expand into deficit format. It already has done, drawing down excess silver inventories that the world once had of about 2 billion ounces in storage, down to now only around 250 million, and continuing to head their way downward. The market, however, is still ignoring this reality for some reason and still thinks that silver should only be around $20 an ounce or so. Now, the reason why this is an issue is that silver production has already peaked, just under 900 million ounces per year back in 2015, or around or a bit above 27,000 tons. It has since declined down initially to 800 million ounces per year, or about 22,000 tons per year, and has bumped back up a little bit with some expanded production in places like Mexico and Peru, but that is tapering out, and it's just kind of now wobbling around 830 or 840 in million ounces, or between 23 and 24,000 tons per year. So the overall situation with silver is non-optimal. Copper also looks like it's going to be running into issues earlier than many of us thought it would. It plateaued for a number of years at around 20 million tons per year and has since climbed back up over the last 2 years up to about 22 million tons because of some new expansions finally. However, while at the same time copper demand is now skyrocketing because of the whole green energy transition and all electric vehicle everything phrase that society is chasing after. But just as it looks like copper was going to start climbing up again and even some things out, we're running into some problems. Environmental protests are erupting in a number of places. In Panama, they caused the permanent shutdown of the large copper mine in that country that was responsible for about 1% of global supply. And Chile, the world's main copper supplier, the big one, has seen their output declining for the last number of years, now down by about 10%, because the new, more green government in Chile has consistently not approved any new expansion permits for mining operations or any permits for new mining operation startups. They did finally last year approve a grand total of one expansion to an existing operation. So if that pattern continues, Chile's output is going to continue spiraling downwards. And since they are responsible for about a quarter of that 22 million tons per year, that is not an optimal direction for us to be going in. Gold has plateaued in global mine production levels, with the absolute peak seemingly having been back in 2018 at 3,656 tons over the course of that year. For last year, 2023, the total global output was 3,644 tons. Although there are a number of things in the works in several places across the world that may let us stretch that out a bit and may let us claw our way up towards maybe just under 4,000 tons per year. Over to nickel. The nickel supply issue has been averted for the moment. It will come back relatively soon. This has spared us by about a few years, maybe, with Indonesia coming to the world's rescue and jumping us from 3 million up to 3.6 million tons per year of global nickel output from mines. So supply has now overshot demand by a few 100,000 tons per year. However, the demand is going up relatively quick. from nickel's inclusion in steel has slowed down in its growth, but it is still growing. And the whole need for EV batteries, and now the new obsession we have, grid scale storage batteries, with battery manufacturing going from 3% of nickel demand just a few years ago to 17% of global nickel demand now. And that is continuing to expand with each year. So demand is going to catch supply within a few years. Over to zinc, a critical metal for coating steel, for galvanizing steel. Zinc production has plateaued and potentially peaked. It got up to 14 million tons per year in 2016 and has since seemingly declined down to 12 million tons per year, with demand having overshot it some years ago and seeing global zinc inventories drop from about 1 million tons in storage down to only 100 or 200,000 now. However, zinc prices are still not really reacting to it yet, so there's not that much of a kick or incentive at the moment for the industry to expand zinc mining operations or go hunting where they haven't looked yet for new reserves. Global lead production definitively peaked in 2013, hitting 5.5 million tons per year. And as of this year, or last year technically, being down to 4.5 million tons per year. Lithium. The lithium issue has thankfully gone out the window for now, probably pushed a fair deal farther down the road than the nickel issue. That is, at least, unless lithium prices remain as collapsed as they are at the moment. In that case, we'll probably see problems arise sooner than that. And also, there is the issue of the whole off and on environmental protest stuff, especially in Chile. But after exceeding 100,000 tons per year, lithium plateaued for a number of years. And over the last couple, as a number of large projects have started worldwide, it has jumped up to now 180,000 tons per year, for the moment overshooting demand. Rare earth metals comprising the full slew of everything from neodymium, praseodymium, herbium, dysprosium, all of those. If you want to see a full rundown of what each one is used for in different devices and machines and things, there's a video being linked in the corner where I go down how each of the individual rare earth metals and minerals is used in society. But the MCS just groups them all together, essentially. So just collectively, rare earths as a whole, all of them totaled together, they have finally caught up to and overshot demand by a little bit, as demand has been exploding, especially with the massive increase in EV manufacturing and our semi-equal to solar panel obsession with wind turbines. With total global rare earth production collectively, all of the different ones put together, coming out last year at 350,000 tons per year. And thankfully, supply diversification is ongoing. So, as opposed to 10 years ago, where China was mining about 90% of the entire world's supply, China is now down to only about 65% of the entire world's supply. And as additional projects in Central Australia and some in Namibia come online, that should decrease to below 50%. Phosphate rock, one of the critical materials we grind up into fertilizer, which allows us to grow so many crops so quickly and sustain a 8 billion plus population now. Phosphate production globally peaked, but not because it actually had to, not because we hit some actual mineable limit. It actually did overshoot demand by a bit. And also, in a number of countries, there's been unrest and some corruption issues, since aside from just Morocco, a decent bit of the other phosphate rock supply is also mined across North Africa and the Middle East, which is not known for being the most stable place in the world. Phosphate rock production from global mines almost hit 270 million tons per year in 2017, but fell down from that and has been wobbling around 220, this time coming in right at 220 million tons over the course of last year. The platinum group metals, primarily platinum and palladium, one of the ones that is really in a actual deficit issue, and another one who the market just refuses to react to the reality of, despite how low the on hand like excess storage inventories have gotten, down into only a few thousand ounces being on hand. The platinum group metals are much rarer than gold and silver. They have been at physical limits for a while. Even with their massive price surges that we've seen over the course of time, they have been plateaued since the early or mid 2000s. Each one, platinum and palladium, at about 200 tons per year. The majority, of course, coming from South Africa, and that is a problem, as South Africa has entered a death spiral, particularly in regards to its power grid, and now beginning to also see something similar happening to its internal rail network, its transportation infrastructure. If you want a quick but more thorough rundown on that, there's another link in the top corner to a video specifically covering that issue. But those two are now becoming a supply issue because demand is jumping upwards. Their primary use is in catalytic converters for ground vehicles to control their emissions. And now that everyone is jumping on these stricter emission standards, the automakers are being forced to make more thorough catalytic converters. And to do that, they need to use more platinum group metals in them, going from around 3 or 4 grams up to around 7 grams per car. Aluminum, or in reality, bauxite ore, the ore that contains aluminum, which looks like essentially orange dirt, whereas iron ore basically looks like red dirt. No real supply issues, and there aren't going to be. There's plenty of it. It's reached globally about 400 million tons per year, and it has capped off for a moment, and that is primarily because of a abrupt curtailment in demand, which is primarily coming from the whole China real estate's mega boom Ponzi scheme thing starting to fall apart. Global iron production actually so enormously overshot demand a while back, going all the way up towards 3.5 billion tons per year, and then proceeding to collapse back down to where global iron ore demand has mostly been for the same amount of time, at around 2.5 billion tons per year, sometimes in the upper twos, closer to three, but wobbling around in that general area. This time coming in right around 2.5 billion tons per year over the course of 2023. Tin, another one that's becoming an issue, especially because it's required for solar panels. Yes, all forms of them, even the basic ones. It's also required for electronics soldering and a number of other things. We've kind of hit the limits despite price surges over the course of time. It has been plateaued since the mid 2000s at around 300,000 tons per year. Last year's total yield coming out at 290,000 tons. Also, tin is just not as abundant as many of the other base metals. As you can see from this other graph tracking tin reserves, known tin in the ground over time, even as we've searched harder with, price surges incentivizing it, we've still noticeably been depleting the amount of known tin. Helium, not a mineral that is mined, but a rare gas that is extracted from the ground either by accompanying natural gas or from occurrences of helium in its own form of reservoirs. The primary ones of those that are known are in the US and Poland. However, recent surveys have also seemed to indicate there is a large one occurring under the southeastern portion of Lake Victoria in Tanzania. So that is now being looked into and may potentially help keep our global supply at least on this same plateau for a little while longer, as helium supply has been on a plateau since the early 2000s at around 150 or 160 million cubic meters per year. And helium is, for modern civilization, something really critical, as it's especially needed for processes like micro welding and precision welding of things that allow the kind of high precision complex machines we have now, as helium is the one noble gas that truly displaces with guarantee effectively every time, displaces everything else, particularly oxygen, which is the one interactive gas that we're trying to avoid in that process, because that would otherwise cause imperfections or impurities in the weld. And helium is also used to purge the room or chamber of all other potentially interactive gases in the fabrication facilities where we make computer processors, wafers, chips, and such. And we're still on that plateau now, this time coming in for last year at 170 million cubic meters per year. Chromium, another key ingredient of many types of steel, hit a high point of 45 million tons per year back in 2019 and has been slipping down since then, not because we've hit an availability limit, but because South Africa is a problem, as it's primarily the output from South Africa that has been down spiraling, following South Africa itself in its full scale national down spiral, with chromium production over the course of last year coming out at 41 million tons per year. Molybdenum, another steel ingredient, usually has new sudden problems. It was okay at about 300,000 tons per year, but now has dropped abruptly to around 260, and that is predominantly because of off and on sudden output losses from Chile and Peru. Chile, those from Chile being on the part of environmental protests, and the government just failing to approve new mining operations or extend the licenses of existing mines. And in Peru's case, there was a bunch of supply disruption from protests, but they weren't environmental protests in Peru's case. They were protests against the current government at the time those were taking place. So molybdenum last year came out at 260,000 tons per year. Manganese, one of the core ingredients of all types of steel, at its most basic foundational proportions, steel as a basic thing is about 98% iron and then 1% carbon, 1% manganese. That's the sort of basic foundation. Those percentages also then change depending on what type of modern high quality, high strength, or whatever alloy you're making, in which you also then add other things like molybdenum and chromium. Manganese has continued climbing as there's not that much of a supply issue with it and has gotten up to about 20 million tons per year, but we might be facing a bit of a plateau because of, again, South Africa. Cobalt, necessary in quite a number of batteries, but also critical as one of the components of various superalloys used in things like power plants, turbines, and generators, and in aircraft engines, and in rocket parts. Thanks to various price surges over the last number of years, mining operations have expanded, primarily in the Congo, of course, where most of it comes from, but they have jumped up to 230,000 tons per year of cobalt production, which is evening things out for the time being. However, the fact that most of it comes from the Congo is that it could disappear at any moment should the situation go south. And another metal in that same area, literally, is tantalum. For similar price surging reasons, now up to 2,400 tons per year. Tantalum is a critical component in a number of pieces of electronic equipment for computers and phones and the like, but it's not an abundant material, and it very well might become an issue because about 60% of the supply comes from that same region. But anyways, that's the end of the presentation for this year's MCS. So thank you all for sticking around and listening or watching. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't already. PayPal and Patreon down there if you want to support me. Only do so if you actually can. There's links in the description to all kinds of different Google Docs featuring data compilations, graphs, charts, analytical essay write-ups, going and covering all types of different things from oil and gas to energy, metals and minerals, demographic stuff, anything you guys might want to see. It's all there 24/7. It's free. A link to my catch channel will be in the top pinned comment as well. May God bless and protect all of you, and I will see you all around next time.